Welcome to In All Things. I'm Sierra, and I would love to welcome you into my living room to have real conversations with you about everything from forgiveness and personalities to community and discipleship. So let's imagine we're sitting on my couch and encouraging each other to seek Christ in all things. Hello, everybody. Welcome to In All Things. I am excited to introduce you to my great friends, Rachel and Jordan.
Hello.
Hi.
Rachel has been on the podcast before a couple times, so I'm happy to have you back.
We like to talk, don't we?
We do, a lot. And Jordan's been asking to come on the podcast a couple times, so here he is.
I don't know that I have, actually.
He has.
Okay.
He was a little bitter about me being on it so much.
Are you the most recurring guest?
I think it's a tie.
I think,
Oh, it's a
yeah.
tie.
Yeah, probably.
Tie with a couple people.
Is this the tiebreaker? Or
No.
is this making the tie? This is making the tie.
This is making the tie.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So
One more time.
One
Which I
more
need to come on.
we'll come up with a topic, I'm sure.
Well, how are the ratings on all the ones she's been on?
I don't know. I'm not pulling that up.
That should maybe decide who's on the most.
Who's on the most, yeah. We'll look at the ratings later.
I'll rate myself.
You'll have to have all your friends share this, and then that's how you get your
Yes.
ratings up, is by sharing the podcast.
Yes.
Wink, wink. So basically now we just introduced you, but do you have another introduction? You can just introduce yourselves more.
We've been married for almost 10 years, coming up this September, not October.
That's awesome.
September 1st. And we have 3 children, ranging from ages 6.5 to 2 years old.
Amazing.
Yep.
Awesome.
So life is crazy.
And I met you when your oldest was like 10 months, I feel like. Or a year. Maybe he was a year.
Maybe a year. Yeah, because
I started, yeah.
Yeah, because when I was pregnant with Audrey, you found out pretty much right away because you guessed it.
Yep. I did.
Yep.
That hand on your stomach will do it. Dead giveaway every time.
Well, I can't put my hand on my stomach and no one says, "Oh, you're glowing, you're pregnant," because it doesn't work that way.
Doesn't work.
Well,
that
it
way.
does now.
It's true.
No, true.
Can you just introduce your kids? I know they're not here, but their
So
names.
Emery is 6.5. He is wild. Audrey is 4. She is very sweet, but also wild. And Rivers is 2. He is also very wild. There's a common theme.
Yes, they are very wild, but also adorable.
They love you. I just love how they just snuggle up to you.
Yeah.
When you
it's my
come over,
favorite.
it's so sweet.
It's the best. Well, speaking of the best, what is the best part of parenthood? We are going to start on the positive notes.
Bedtime.
Yeah, I mean, best of both worlds right there. But another favorite part as a stay-at-home mom who gets to be with them 24/7 is when they finally, after thousands of times of repeating yourself, get it.
Yeah.
And I mean that a little sarcastically, but also like just out of the blue, especially Emery will be like, "Hey, Mom, what about this Bible verse?" Or "Jesus said this, didn't he?" Or they'll start singing a worship song or whatever that we didn't know that they're listening to. And so that's a huge reward because a lot goes into repeating yourself and repeating yourself and not seeing the rewards for a long time. And then it like finally, probably during the hardest parts of parenting, it comes out that they actually got it. That's really nice.
Yeah.
That's rewarding.
That's awesome. Before you became parents, what were some things that you thought would be hard but are actually easy?
Honestly, for me, giving birth.
Okay.
That was the easiest
That's the
part of
easiest
parenthood right there. Everybody was like, beware of the baby stage. It's so hard. Best stage ever.
The newborn stage?
Yeah, newborn stage is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say now when they're a little bit older and they run around more, I like that better, which is fine. I think one thing that I thought was going to be hard but is actually easy is, and maybe it's just our kids, and actually it's not all the time anymore, but they entertain themselves quite a bit without our help, which is nice.
Some of them might get hurt, but it turns out to be fine most of the time.
Yeah.
Makes them learn, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you just thought, Jordan, that they wouldn't entertain themselves as much as they do?
Yes. Yeah. But now I'm realizing that now they're kind of turning the corner where they want to be entertained by us, I feel like, too, now, though.
But I think that's like seasons too, because like if I let them watch too much TV, they just expect to be entertained a lot of the time and everything, especially Emery. But if I like turn off the TV and just kind of force them to be creative, they're really good at entertaining themselves. For sure. Yeah. For sure. I think it has a lot to do with, because he's like, I need something in my ears. Like Emery just wants to listen to stuff all the time. And so once that's all like shut out, he's like, okay, he can entertain himself. And Audrey and Rivers they'll just find something.
They'll just find something.
Probably something that's off limits, but they'll find something.
There you go. Yeah, it's kind of crazy how that TV just, I feel like it's easy as adults too, to just get sucked into something and then just be complicit in being entertained by whatever's
totally
playing.
And that's probably one thing that's seemed like it would be easy to do, but it's actually difficult, where it's like, okay, we can't just turn the TV on and let them go. And so now it's like, oh my gosh. Because that's probably more or less what I do when I'm alone with them. Not all the time, though, but it's really easy to do that. But I know it's like, that's the worst thing for them probably at this point.
Right. Yeah. And I work from home, so that like if I need to get stuff done, like the easiest thing, or like this morning, Emery woke up at 6 a.m. He's like, can I watch? And I was like, I'm so exhausted. Sure. And it was on for way too long. And you could tell that in his attitude and everything. So yeah, like definitely before we were parents, I was like, oh, it'll be easy to monitor that stuff. And it's not.
It's not.
but we have put a ban on like
stupid YouTube videos.
Well, stupid YouTube videos, right. But also like Kindle usage. Like he used to have a Kindle, and that would just make him ragey, like ragey. Yeah. And so finally, like he kept asking for it, and I was like, "It's gone. It's bye. Yeah. We're not using it." And sometimes they watch on my iPad, but only for a tiny bit, like but or only if they're doing like educational stuff. But yeah. So we definitely thought that would be easier, because growing up, like I didn't have a lot of TV. Right. Like I got to watch Garfield for 30 minutes, and that was it.
Right. Oh, throwback to Garfield. Wow.
I know, and he was disrespectful too. I'm surprised my parents let me watch it.
They didn't know.
Caillou was always off limits. He was too whiny.
He's the worst. He's the worst.
So then flipping that around, what were some, I know Jordan, you kind of mentioned just one thing, but what were some things that you thought would be easy before you became parents, but are actually super hard?
Everything else.
It's been hard, like becoming parents and not letting things trigger you.
Right.
And yeah, it's been learning how selfish I am. That's been humbling. But I think just like living out our faith too. It's like we do, like we're in our heads a lot. So like we just think through stuff, but like actually talking it out with them and like, this is why we do this. This is why we do this. It's so hard. And I just thought it would be like super easy to just live out our faith in front of our kids. Oh. But then they do something to push your buttons, and suddenly you're screaming at them, and you're not living out your faith very well.
Yeah.
So that's been difficult for sure. And just realizing like, oh, I probably should have gotten healing for this before I became a parent.
Well, that was actually going to be kind of one of my next questions, and it probably leads into that, is what are some things that God has taught you about yourself since becoming parents? Besides that you're selfish.
Right. Oh, right. That'd be number one, probably.
Okay, we need to get more positive. He's given me a lot of grace for my parents. There's so much like talk about, oh, my parents did this wrong, my parents did this wrong, just like in the social media universe.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't know if these people don't have kids or what, but like I think realizing like God has just been giving me grace too. Like, yeah, you need to work on your junk, but also your kids' upbringing is not all dependent on you. Like whether they're going to follow me or not isn't all dependent on you. It is like, I'm the Holy Spirit. I will work in their hearts and their lives. So yes, we have a huge part of it. Absolutely. Like I'm not saying that, But when we have hard days, like I did today, my kids' salvation and their life is not dependent on that one bad day. Like God can absolutely turn that around. And also he's taught me that apologizing goes a long way.
Yeah.
To my husband and to my kids, for sure. Because if like after I got upset with Emery today and everything, he came over and sat in my lap and we hugged each other and I said, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have yelled like that. Can you forgive me? And he goes, yeah, and everything. And then he went right back to coloring. So I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact on them, like to get angry, but God can definitely use it.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably really hard to see all these people commenting like, oh, my parents screwed me up. My parents yelled at me or whatever. And then you have a day where you're yelling at your kids. Now you feel like, oh my gosh, I screwed them up. But you
for sure
don't just by doing that one day or having a difficult season or whatever that is. So
right. Yeah.
And like you said, being humble in that situation
trying
goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think one thing that I've learned about myself is that I grew up, not necessarily it was my family's fault or my parents' fault or whatever, but I had a lot of fear of things growing up. And so after Emery was born, I really realized that with like just kind of in my head going through all these worst case scenarios. And it's like, well, that's no way to live. And that's impossible to live that way because, it's a mess. Life is just a mess sometimes and nothing's ever going to be perfect. And so that's one thing I think I kind of learned about myself, that I need to really, over my thoughts, really, instead of having fear, but have faith and have peace about that instead of letting fear take over on that stuff too. So
that's really good. I feel like a lot of people are comfortable in their fear. So that's really good.
And I think definitely that's the last 2 years, it's been a lot easier for people just to live and stay in that fear too.
For sure.
Just because it's like, well, I can just stay here and just not have to worry about anybody else and just, be selfish about yourself, whatnot. But that's obviously the opposite of how we're called to live as Christians.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think that's a big thing, especially for people now who have been through the past couple of years when they start having kids. Hopefully that's not an issue for them, and that's something that even as Christians, I think that's a lot that we're dealing with right now, that we can kind of get over and understand that that's not how we're supposed to live.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's really good.
For sure.
So thinking of this specific season then for you guys in your parenting with your specific kids, what are some things that you're learning right now?
Patience. Lots and lots of patience. I think I'm learning a lot, like finally after having a kid for 6.5 years, that they are not adults. They're not going to get something right away. Adults don't even get something right away. You have to repeat it, But like I was saying in the beginning, like repeating and then they finally get it. Like I'm not a great person at consistency. Just ask Jordan. He is so consistent. I'm like, I cannot take a daily vitamin to save my life. Like I just can't. It doesn't matter if they're right there on the counter. I can't. And so just I've noticed that when I am consistent, there are rewards and there are benefits in my kids' behavior, in my behavior. And so just being consistent, even when we don't see those fruits right away, even when my kid is screaming at me for the decision that we've said, nope, you need to do this because this is disrespectful. And just being consistent about that line that we've drawn and being consistent about discipline, it's so important. And I heard this from my mom back when Emery was a baby, like be consistent. And I've heard it from a whole bunch of other people. And I was just like, nah, it's fine. And it's honestly like in the season that I'm in right now, it's one of the things that I'm like, I just need to be consistent about this because that's where the fruit is going to come from. And it might be years out from now, but it'll be worth it, Yeah. And so that's one of the things that I'm learning.
It's like creating a discipline within yourself too.
Yeah.
Or a habit. And
yeah, For sure. I
sticking
mean,
with something.
because when it like gets difficult to hold that line, you know, and you give in or whatever, and there's grace for that. There's always grace for that, which I'm so thankful for.
Yeah.
The one thing I feel like that I think I've been learning, not necessarily in this season, but just as a parent, is just, I think kind of what Rachel said, a lot of the little stuff is not going to matter in the long run. You know, the little toys they get or whatever, it's not going to be really a big deal in the long run when they look back at like, oh, you know, on a trip somewhere, that memory or an experience somewhere. And so I think one thing is like, a lot of times I would say I'm more detail oriented than my wife. And so thinking about just the small stuff is like, oh no, we need this, this, and this, and this. And it's not really going to matter in the long run when we have 3 kids under 6 years old if something doesn't go perfectly right. Because
Yeah.
it never does.
It never
It
will.
never does.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And I think I'm too like easy. I'm like, it won't go right anyways. It's fine.
Sure.
And then
Well,
like,
yeah.
you know, so we complement each other
That's
that
good.
way.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
And sometimes in those plans that get screwed up in whatever way, sometimes those are where the best memories come from.
I mean,
And
they
the
were
best
in my
moments.
childhood for sure.
Yeah.
Jordan's laughing because he knows my parents. But yeah. Yep, I totally agree. I think especially like this just huge magnifying glass on parenting, again, on social media, is just making you feel like, oh, if I don't have this perfect, like my kid's childhood is going to be ruined or they're going to have to go to therapy. What I realize is your kid will probably have to go to therapy whether you do a great job or not. That's just, I don't know. That's
Very probable.
so, just realizing like, okay, like take out the stuff that is very important to you and focus on that. And that might change every couple of years too.
Yeah.
So,
True.
yep.
So your kids are 2.5 years apart, right? I'm doing
Yeah.
the math correctly? Okay.
Yep.
So what have you learned about raising kids in those different stages and multiple kids in different stages and ages all at once?
It gets fun when the oldest is 6 and the youngest is 2 because he just takes care. It's so cute. Well, Audrey too. Audrey's a little mama. She's the 4-year-old, and she loves taking care of Rivers too. I don't know how much he appreciates it, but it's just fun to see how they imitate each other. Sometimes, okay, let's put a caveat on that.
For
But
the good stuff. The bad stuff, it's not funny. No.
but they do imitate each other, and like when we go to church, they're a little bit more shy at church, and it's so cute. Like in the seats, they just kind of huddle up together and like are their own little like
Aw.
clan.
Cute.
And yeah, it's just been fun. Like with their different, like Emery can help out with Rivers, so he buckles him in his car seat, and he shares stuff with him sometimes, and they're just but there's a lot of fights too. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, but like between the 6 and the 4-year-old, there's a little more animosity, which I guess we should expect maybe because they've been around each other longer. They're sick of each other more maybe.
I think it has more to do with there being 3 kids instead of 2 because there's always like a third wheel.
Right.
So I think that might have more to do with it, but which is hard.
Yeah.
Like my mom took the 2 older kids separate weeks or whatever. So there was only 2 of the kids with me for a couple days and they got along great.
Oh,
I
okay.
was like, oh, that's interesting. But I think another thing that we've learned is like we've learned so much about what not to do or what to do with Emery so we can refine our parenting style on the 4 and 2-year-old.
These oldest
He's the guinea
kids.
pig.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, poor kid.
Yeah.
Poor kid.
Because you're the oldest too,
Yep.
right? Okay.
I am.
So you feel that is
I
accurate?
100%
Oh,
feel
okay.
that.
There was only me and my sister in my family, so it's like, yeah, there wasn't, and it's only a 2 years difference, so I don't think there was much
But
difference.
were you the oldest?
No, I'm
Oh,
the
you're the
youngest,
youngest. Okay.
but still, I don't know.
Oh, you're both the babies.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
lucky ducks.
responsibility in marriage. We didn't know how to handle that. We're switching to a marriage episode now.
No, I still bring the guinea pig things up, and I'm 27, so good luck.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we got that to look forward to,
Yeah.
huh?
Well, I looked at what my older siblings did, and I was like, I'm not going to do that because that has that consequence. And so I learned myself
Yeah,
pretty
but
quickly.
Sierra's like a
An
model
angel.
citizen.
Exactly.
She is.
I
That's
was
true.
the angel.
That's true. Yeah.
So it was just the other two weren't.
But I think with our oldest, like, we weren't strict with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Emery, we were just so
Consistently strict, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
You
we
weren't
just
consistent.
Weren't, right.
Okay.
like we had no idea, like, quote unquote, what our parenting style was, and I don't think we really had a vision for what we wanted our family to look like. It was just kind of like a general, like, oh, bring them to church and, raise them up in the church. But it wasn't like specifically like, we want him to have this attitude towards life, that sort of thing. And so we were pretty, like, regarding food and discipline and everything, we weren't, I definitely wasn't as strict as I am now with the other two, because I've seen, like, how he acts now. And Emery does really well with boundaries. He does better with strict instruction rather than, oh, you can do whatever. And so being strict with the other two now, like, I'm like, okay, we're a little farther ahead than we were with him.
Okay.
Poor kid. But I mean, we would, he was pretty spoiled.
It's my fault.
Whenever I worked at the studio every other week on Saturday, Jordan would take him to Target and get a toy. So every time we went to the grocery store, Emery would freak out because I didn't get him a toy.
Oh, man.
Because he thought that when you go to stores, you get toys.
Oh.
Kind of true. You get something when you go to a store.
So yeah, that was a hurdle we had to overcome.
Yeah. That's funny.
So yeah.
It would be interesting, though, if we actually went through some sort of parenting class. What would change, or what wouldn't change, or what? Yeah, I mean, that's like probably the multiverse somewhere else. That's another.
We're not going to a parenting class. Is what he's saying. No.
Yeah, it's too late now.
Well, when I was pregnant with Emery, like, I had just, like, poo-pooed all of the parenting books and especially the pregnancy books, because I was like, that's conventional medicine and I don't want to do conventional medicine. And but I wish I would have, like, read, like, Christian parenting books or whatever that would have been like, that would have given me some direction. Because when you're in the midst of parenthood, you don't have time to read that stuff.
Yeah.
Or you just get so weighed down in guilt because you didn't do it.
Right.
So it's just like, I wish I would have done that. But I think we have older couples that we look up to now whose kids we admire. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, they're probably more strict than we are, but we should probably learn from that.
Yeah. So I try to make, I mean, I'm sure you know this, try to make the podcast applicable to everyone in some sort of way. So for those who are listening who are not yet parents, but someday want to be, is there anything that you wish you would have done to prepare yourself for parenthood?
Like I said, I think I would have preferred that we would have, like, looked through some parenting books together and just read some stuff and come up with, like, a family vision almost. Like, this is what we want our family to look like. This is how we want to raise our kids. And this is how we were raised in different ways. So this is how it's going to build tension.
We didn't really ever talk that out, I don't think.
We didn't. No.
Right.
Jordan
Whoops.
and I, in our first 5 years of marriage, were not great communicators. First 5 years, I would say, probably, right?
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So we were very, we held it all inside.
Okay.
Neither of
We
us like
expected
conflict.
to read each other's minds.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh.
was the
Yeah.
problem.
So I don't like conflict. He doesn't like conflict. So we just didn't talk
Together.
until it exploded. So there's that. But yeah, I wish we would have done that to prepare, and just maybe, well, Emery was a little bit of a surprise pregnancy. Like we weren't trying.
Okay.
I mean, we weren't preventing, but we weren't trying either.
Well, we decided we were going to start trying, and then we realized, oh, never mind, we're pregnant.
Oh,
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
oh, that's funny.
So we kind of just jumped in, both feet and everything, and did the whole like, oh, what should our nursery look like, instead of like learning about the stuff that we should learn about. And yeah, I think just learning about what we wanted our family to look like is a big one, for sure.
Yeah, like I would say like talking about what your values are and what you hold dear
Yeah,
in life.
because we just assume,
Right.
Like, oh, she's a Christian. It's the same thing.
But I mean, we were raised so differently. I mean,
Yes, definitely.
I'm the youngest of 6 kids, raised in a charismatic environment, and Jordan is.
And I was raised normally.
Okay. I mean,
I got my own Game Gear for Christmas, and after my sister opened hers up, I was really sad I didn't get one. The next present I opened up, I got my own. So, #blessed.
we got jars of pickles for Christmas.
And I'm not saying we were like rich or spoiled or anything.
He was
but
spoiled.
I was spoiled, maybe. But I didn't mind.
Usually they don't.
But just like the different like like how our parents expressed anger.
Sure.
Like my mom and like she's amazing. She's amazing, and God has healed her like of a ton. But like my mom, she would show her anger very clearly. And his parents are very like
Is that different from what we do then? Is that
non-confrontational. Right, your parents are very non-confrontational.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. And so just the different ways, like I would be like, oh, he's not mad, like,
Oh,
but then I'd be like, oh, he actually is, because
Sure,
he just doesn't scream about it.
sure.
Sure.
And I was the youngest of 6, so I have
Yeah.
to scream about it because I don't get hurt otherwise. So, which is maybe how Rivers feels right now.
He's pretty loud.
Except when I'm there, he's just like
Oh my gosh.
so stoic.
Oh my gosh.
Stares at you.
Just be with him for a couple hours. Yeah.
Daddy!
Yaddy. He calls you Yaddy.
Daddy!
But yeah, I think those are the big ones that we wish
Okay.
we would have done, differently and everything.
Being on the same page and
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
communication.
Communication. That's a
My
big one.
personal motto. It
And
is.
well, okay, so like this is for people who aren't parents yet, but like even like Sierra, when you're single, like I love that you come into our family and watch our family dynamics, and you're gonna learn what not to do by watching our family dynamics.
I love that too.
But like even if your listeners are single, like just start preparing now, like what you want to do to be a like a parent, like a good parent or whatever. Just work through some stuff like from when you were younger, or learn what your triggers are, and I despise that word so much because it is so overused. But there are buttons that are pushed and they will set you off. And you don't know that you have those buttons until you become a parent. Am I right, Jordan?
Yes.
He's over here giggling. So like if you're single, if you are engaged, if you are married and not yet pregnant, like learn what those are, or learn to downplay your reaction to them. Just learn how to manage it. So that parenting will be just a little, parenting is just going to be difficult. Like it is so rewarding, but it is so difficult. But you can probably work on that before you become a parent. So.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I would never tell anybody that being a parent is easy, because it's definitely not. It's one of the hardest things I've had to do in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And I haven't had a hard life by any means, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super difficult. So yeah, I think just not even like you don't even have to go to therapy, like,
Yeah.
But just being in community with people and observing people with kids that you like kids who are respectful, and so probably not observing our family. No, just kidding. But observing that and asking them what they do, and even before you're married or pregnant or anything, just learning from people whose families you really respect.
Right.
Like that would be a great thing to do to prepare, so that you can, once you get married or once you get pregnant, you can talk out your family values and be like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to be on the same page, and we're going to discipline the same way, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, because you kind of I get to come into your guys' house and have dinner with you.
Sorry about that.
No, I love it because it's so much fun, and it's fun to sit at the dinner table with you guys and see how you parent and hang out with your kids, because they are great kids.
I'm a much better parent when I have people observing me,
well, that's
because
probably
I
the
can't
case.
fly off the lid.
It's like in public school when the principal comes in and audits the class for the teacher.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah.
kind of what it is. You guys were both homeschooled though, weren't you?
Yeah.
Okay,
so.
never mind. That didn't.
That never
land
happened.
here.
Well,
Okay,
I went to
there
I
are
went to high
listeners
school.
there are listeners who went to public
Right.
school.
So it's like when you're homeschooled and your dad. Never mind.
Oh my
No,
goodness.
but it is great. But one thing that I appreciate about both of you is you learn continually, and then you apply what you're learning. So I've known Rachel for 5.5 years, and just how your parenting style has changed and what you've learned and applied into your life is amazing. And then you've taught me by extension.
I've
And a
talked
lot.
to you about a lot of stuff.
Sorry.
Yeah. Keep
Quit
her under
apologizing.
control. No, I have learned a lot, so
Oh, that's
it's great.
good. That's good. Yeah. And I one of the things that I didn't know until I met you is I love that one of my values has become to welcome those people, not just with families, but those who are single and those in all stages of life. My single friends are some of the best people ever, you included. And I love having them over, and I love having my kids, interact with you and everything. And I just love welcoming people into our family so that they can just see we're not a perfect family, but we're healthy-ish.
Sure.
But you're a real family, and you strive to serve Christ.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is our, that is our main motivation for our family is to serve Christ and everything. And so without that, I don't think we'd even be trying to be better parents, or we would be trying with all of the worldly
Right.
values and ways, and we'd be
Right.
failing terribly and feel super guilty and everything. So, I mean, I still feel guilty sometimes, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but knowing that God's grace covers it all is it's all good.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about people who aren't parents yet. How about the people who are parents and they're seasons ahead of you? Because you talked about that you admire certain families' children and everything. But how can those families who are ahead of younger families, I guess, how can they best come alongside you as parents with young kids?
Probably not feeling like they're overstepping boundaries when they want to just give advice or be involved. I wouldn't. The people that Rachel and I are talking about, I would welcome any advice ever, anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that.
And then there's people that we would not welcome any
There's
advice
that.
ever.
Yes, exactly. There's that too. But
Yeah.
I mean, even though they're either our parents or friends of ours from church, and they have kids who are grown up, or they still have younger kids, I wouldn't feel like they're overstepping any boundaries at all, giving advice, because they're just good people like that.
Yeah.
Would you say they know that? Would you say that they would be able to know that you would welcome their advice?
I think, well, for a certain family, at our church or whatever, I ask advice and everything. And she's, the mom, gives it pretty easily and everything. So, but probably, I mean, she's pretty careful about
Sure.
you should do it this way, or,
Sure.
you should do it that way.
Wording has a big
Oh, yeah.
effect.
But I also think and we've tossed around this idea like at our church too, like parenting classes, but like also providing babysitting during the class, because that's the hardest part. But I think just like instead of watching a DVD on people who we can't relate to and they're you know whatever, like I just think it'd be awesome to have more like mentorship, you know, but it could be in a group too.
Yeah.
And just being like, well, this has worked, you know, with our kids, or this didn't work, or something like that. So, yeah, I think that would be super cool too, just to provide resources. Because honestly, we're coming like from a generation that does not know how to discipline. Like, I'm raising my hands here. I don't know. Like, I did not know how to discipline effectively, and there's a lot of people that we know that don't know really how to discipline. And I think it would just be really fruitful to have parents who have grown kids, or have kids older than our kids at least, that could just come alongside of us and be like, hey, this is effective. And,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also, like, this is random, but every single one of our kids is different in how they receive discipline. So, like sometimes our kid just needs a spanking. I don't know if I'll get called out on abuse for that, but
We'll
but
cut it out. I'm kidding.
but my other child, like, you just look at her. Oh, our only child, that's a girl. You just look at her, or like put something on the counter like too hard because you're frustrated, and she'll just start sobbing.
Aww.
So kids just they just need to be disciplined differently too.
Yep. What would you say is the hardest thing about parenting in today's society? Because I think it would be hard, and I'm not a parent.
Comparison.
How so? Is there any form of social media that seems to be
Someone's getting called out here.
right?
I should probably quit social media.
Comparison on your LinkedIn profile, or
Yeah, comparison on like Instagram or whatever. Like, I used to follow all of these gentle parenting accounts, and I have quit that because, first of all, they don't come from a godly perspective. And second of all, they were like, you can lose your crap all the time and it'll be just fine, just as long as you apologize. And I was like, that's not helping me. Like, you know, so, but comparison, like, you know, everybody shares their highlights or whatever, but then also just comparison, like, I'm almost like, oh, well, this is how I did it, and I would never let my kids do that. And she means it in a good way, but I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, it's just not fun.
It's hard.
I think the hardest thing for me is I can be somewhat negative about things. The silent laughter from Rachel is deafening.
How so?
I would not call myself an optimist, if that's putting it the best way I can.
So how does that apply in parenting?
I don't want to say that everything sucks, because that's not a good way to... I don't want to say that to our kids. Be like, well, that's the problem because they're stupid and they made a bad choice. So that's not our fault though, son. Well, I don't know what to tell you. So, but I don't know if that's necessarily for this time, because also I don't want to be like super PC about everything. It's like, because that's dumb too.
Yeah.
So, and maybe I'd be called out for it more if I was more like that on social media or out and about. But I think for me, that's one thing where it's like, there are bad choices that people make. And I just want to say, hey, don't do this because they're being stupid. But how do you say that well? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, that's something that my mindset has been shifted on a lot, because I wasn't negative like out in the open, but in my head I was negative all the time about parenting, and I was just like, this is hard, this sucks, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get through this? And using social media for good is Felicia Masonheimer. And
Is she sponsoring this podcast? Is that
sponsored by Very
The only time
Podcast.
she comes up is when Rachel's on.
It's true. I'm
That's what I
so
thought.
sorry. I am so sorry. But really, her and Abigail from Emma's for Mama, like, and Abigail has like 10 kids, and she is just the most positive person about parenting and everything. Not like glossing over all the hard parts, but just being like, I think her saying is like, hard is not the same as bad. And like parenting has literally been, especially in the last 2 years, like going from 2 kids to 3 has been one of the hardest things in my life. Like easily, because it's just like, it's awesome adding on another kid, but it's also hard with the third wheel dynamic. And I nurse, and so like he gets way more time than the other kids, you know, and my other kids like quality time. And so but changing my mindset, like, and honestly just saying that over and over again in my head is like, hard is not the same as bad. It's okay, it's gonna get through, you know. But just changing that mindset, like in my mind, even though I wasn't saying it out loud, just knowing like, okay, when we go to the grocery store, people are watching, and are they going to see a positive outlook on parenting our kids, or are they not? And personally, I think like one of the biggest things contributing to, not one of the biggest things, but one of the things contributing to the lack of respect of life in our country, and abortion and everything, is looking at, you know, all of these accounts on social media that are just making fun of having kids and parenting and everything, and just making it out to be the worst thing ever, that you need a drink to get through, and they're just little leeches, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and then you look at the abortion rates and you're like, there's a connection there.
Right. Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
And so I've been really convicted on that in the past, I don't know, year and a half maybe. And so I'm just really trying hard. Like, I still lose it some days, but I'm really trying hard to like shift my mindset around that, because I don't want them to be like, oh, they're Christians, but they act the same
As everyone else.
as everyone else,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, that's a thing for me.
And too, as Christians, like, just thinking about it, it's a biblical mandate for us to have, you know, for a man to leave his father and mother and to cling to his wife, and for them to be fruitful and multiply. So to think about that, and I think Christians too give parenting a bad name too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so to think about it, like, that's not honoring to God at all when you put it in that light. So I think that's one thing where I don't know if it's more prevalent. It is probably more prevalent now in this time with the lack of sanctity of life. But I think as Christians, it's something where we got to just stop feeding into that too.
Yeah.
And like saying, oh, my kids, I know, which is maybe a little hypocritical because we did that for the past half hour on the podcast here. But just the idea of how God sees that life, and how God sees you as a parent, and how God sees your children and whatnot. It's just, it's amazing to think about it that way instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, I think the mentality I had for a lot of years into parenting was, we're raising them, we just got to get them alive to call it, you know, to out of high school or whatever. And another thing that has just God has convicted me about and has been changing, I think, in both of our lives, is like, we are just like, I've in the past couple of years, I've been more attracted to like theology and everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't learn this stuff growing up. It was just kind of implied, but I didn't understand the implication of it, you know? And so just getting more theology into our kids and everything, and teaching it and discipling them. And so a mindset shift, I think, for both of us has been like, we're not just raising them, we're discipling them.
Yeah.
We're discipling them in the ways of Christ. And they may walk away from it when they get older, but we have this time to disciple them now. And that helps me a lot on hard days when I'm just like, what am I doing here? You know, just knowing that like we are raising them to love Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and not just love him, but know him. You
Right.
know? So
exactly.
but yeah, I mean, like some of the stuff we said, like, yeah, parenting is hard. Like it's kind of hard to find a balance between like, let's share the hard stuff, you know, so people aren't feeling alone. But then also like, no, there's really sweet moments. There's really sweet moments. Our kids' favorite thing is family worship night.
Oh,
Family band. Sorry, family band.
Okay.
And
Sometimes we don't do worship songs. Sometimes we sing Paw Patrol or whatever.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And Rivers has a little ukulele that he loves. And we have drums and piano and a microphone. So, I mean, they love doing that. And they do worship songs a lot of the time. They have their favorite worship songs or whatever. So they love to do that. And then repeating Bible verses and everything like that we've tried to memorize and everything. And praying for people when they're sick. They just, that's what they automatically do now. And and they, you know what, they might not understand what they're doing. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's like the practice of it. You know, I don't think a lot of adults understand why they're doing it either. So whatever.
Right.
But
right.
yeah. So like it really does have so many sweet moments, and yeah.
Much more good than bad.
Yeah, definitely.
But when you're in the bad, it's hard to see.
Yes.
It's yeah.
But
I mean,
that's the case with anything.
Yeah, this is
That's
a
the case with
hard
anything.
season of life, honestly. Like with a 2-year, like the 2 and 4-year-old are really pushing their will, you know, well, and the 6-year-old. So, you know, all of them. And
And me.
and Jordan.
You're fourth.
So it's a hard season of life. Like this is a difficult age. But just hoping and praying that like when they get older, they'll be able to come to us with anything, and we'll still be able to discuss God with them and answer their questions and be okay with not having an answer. So yeah, because right now, like Emery, he asks some good questions, like theological questions about like death and like all of this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So like I try my best to make like space for that, and it's really cool.
That's awesome. Any final thoughts, tips, tricks, resources? I know you didn't read any parenting books, but you know, maybe you found
okay. Well, Felicia Mason, I
So we did a marriage counseling course, and I think more than anything with our marriage too, that helped us with the parenting stuff too, which was awesome. So
yeah, like one of the tips there was when you are having an argument, it's not you against each other. It's both of you, like, together trying to find a solution. And that, yeah, for my kid, you know, with kids, it's like you feel like you're butting heads a lot. And yeah, it really helped our communication too. But there's this thing they say in there, we bless our spirits to be prominent. I don't know the rest. What's the rest?
And to receive every good thing you have for us.
And we pray that over Emery. Hasn't worked yet, but
Pray that over all of them, and it's 0 for 3, but
yeah. So yeah, that really did help us a lot. Like putting a kid in a room for a little bit so that they can calm down is not abusive. I mean, it depends on your kid, but like sometimes a girl's got to chill. I mean, Audrey gets out of her mind like sometimes, and you can try to like logically talk to her, and she will not respond unless she is in a room by herself, and then she can calm down.
Sure.
And
also that probably works as a parent too.
Take a moment to yourself.
lock my door. Yeah, I have had to do that several times. Like I tell my kids, I'm like, I need to go into the bedroom and calm myself down.
But it is a good example to practice.
Yeah.
Do you say it that calmly?
The more calm I am, the more warning they have that it's serious. Oh, yeah. But I don't know if we have any tips or tricks. Do not prepare them separate meals. that'll backfire on you for sure. For sure. So
Coming from personal experience?
Well,
maybe a little bit.
maybe you should follow our experience.
Tips to share. Well, okay, screen time.
The more the better.
We don't we don't let our kids like go to restaurants and watch their iPads or anything. Well, they don't have an iPad, but we don't like give them our phones to watch.
Sure.
And they do just fine, don't they? Like,
Especially at Buffalo Wild Wings with all the TVs. They
Yeah.
do great.
that's true. But they just find, and honestly, like the more screens you give them, the more crabby they are. So don't even start it.
Yeah, because you've seen I remember you talking about that. You've seen like a big difference when you implement no screen time.
Yeah. Yep. So the punishment for Emery when he gets like out of his mind, like throws stuff, hits us or whatever, the result is no more screen time for like a week. And he is like the most creative kid ever. And he whines a little bit for screen time, but he just gets so creative for most of it. And I'm still trying to like inch my way towards less screen time, which is hard because when one gets a show, the other one wants a show.
Yeah.
And so it's, but if you are not yet a parent, just hold off on the screen time for a couple of years. Your baby does not need a screen.
Yep. Good advice.
That's my
That's awesome.
and don't let them watch YouTube videos. No. Don't do it. So, yeah, that's all I have.
That's awesome. No, I really appreciate you guys coming on, and I appreciate the example that you set for other parents and parents yet to be. So,
Thanks for having us.
yeah,
Yeah, thanks. I finally made it.
you finally made it, Jordan. I'm so glad you tuned in for today's conversation. I hope you are leaving uplifted in your walk with the Lord, because that is my prayer for this podcast. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at In All Things Pod, and I would love it if you invited more friends into our conversations. You can also visit my website at inallthingspodcast.com. If this episode was encouraging to you, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening platform, because it helps the algorithms and it allows In All Things to be accessible to more people. See you next time.